first-hand accounts on the impact of the illegal Zionist entity occupation, including the First Intifada. He's an activist who has delivered lectures on numerous politically and socially relevant topics in masajid, universities, and elsewhere. Dr. Hamid recently joined us in October 2023 after the events in October 7th. Without further ado, Dr. Ayman Hamid to the stage.
جزاك الله خير. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الخلق والمرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم لا سهل إلا ما جعلته سهلا وأنت تجعل الحزن إن شئت سهلا. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. It's very nice to be here again, inshallah, talking to my nieces and nephews. Inshallah, I hope that will be interesting and enjoyable for you guys. Make it like a brotherly and more comfy and cozy. Inshallah, feel free to ask questions and stop me anytime you want. It's very hard to talk about. Excuse me. It's very hard to talk about a topic like a new administration, new president, and how is that going to impact my life. Actually, without putting that in context of what happens in the Muslim world, especially what happens in Gaza and what happened in Gaza and the recent event, not just in Gaza, also in Syria and elsewhere in the Muslim land. So to put that in perspective and to put that in context of how that is going to impact my life and how is it going to influence a new life under this administration, we really have to put it under the context of what happened in Gaza. So a lot of people ask me this question, what happened in Gaza is actually a disaster. What happened in Gaza is something that should have not happened, because we look at the magnitude of destruction, magnitude of killing, magnitude of mass murder and mass genocide. Was the price worth it? So to actually answer that question, we have to step out of materialism and material results and look at it from a spiritual and also sentimental aspect, and then we can easily answer the question. So what happens in Gaza is definitely something that is hard melting, something that actually what happens even today, the announcement that some of our brothers and leaders in the resistance that have met Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as shaheed, is something that is hard melting and something that will fill our heart with grief and pain. Nevertheless, was the price worth it? I think it was actually a price was due, not only to be paid by the Muslims in Gaza, but also by the Muslims at large. And inshallah today we will learn a little bit how we can benefit from that and put it in context. So what happened in Gaza is actually a triumph. So Gaza has triumphed for many reasons. Number one, maybe you're a lot younger, and if you go back to pre-October 7th events, and if you look at the Muslim situation and the situation in Palestine and what happens and how we heard and how we become to hear about the situations in Palestine, we were actually irrelevant in the world arena. The Muslims in Palestine and the issue of Palestine as an occupied territory in the Muslim land, occupied by the most brutal entity in the world, the Zionist occupation, is something that the world has never paid attention to. All the time, even in the media here in the US, the Muslims in Palestine are the terrorists, always looked at as the terrorists, and the people, or the so-called the Zionists, are the civilized and the ones who have actually the right to exist. So Gaza came with a flood and actually had exposed all of that. What happened on October 7th and all the subsequent events were actually due to bring this issue to life, where the world has realized that there is an occupied land called Palestine, and there are occupied people who are called Palestinians. And this suffering did not start October 7th or October 15th or what have you. It actually started 100 years before that. So this suffering that the Muslims, and I came from over there and I grew up in the First Intifada, and I suffered, and it's an honor actually, this occupation where as kids, as 6, 7, 10 years old, we were kicked, we were tortured, fire was put out in our bodies. Again, as young as 5, 6, 7 years old. So this is not something new, but the world had never seen such atrocity to the magnitude that we have seen today. So number one, how Gaza Triumph had brought this issue to the consciousness of the world. So every free man and woman in the world had already known and realized that Gaza is under occupation, Palestine is under occupation. This Zionist entity is a brutal, genocidal, occupational power that is occupying Palestine and a part of the Muslim land. That's number one. Number two, it also brought very clear the hypocrisy of the Western world, the hypocrisy of the Western nations. And I don't mean the people, I do mean the governments. It had brought to everyone's attention how hypocritical these organizations and these so-called Western governments, when it comes to the Muslims and the genocide of the Muslims and the killing of the Muslims, even though they are the victims, they are called to be the ones who actually has the problem. So it had exposed the Western governments, it had exposed their agenda, it had exposed their philosophy, it had exposed their power where they put it to help the oppressors, not to help the oppressed. So number three, the situation in Palestine and what happened in Gaza and how Gaza came as a triumph is that it exposed the Arab regimes and the Arab rulers, where a lot of Muslims argued that there are rulers that could be fixed. These are rulers that could be worked on. These are rulers and governments that we could somehow work with and try to fix, and maybe they can adopt our issues and work for the cause and the interest of the Muslims. That actually was or became very, very clear. None of that is actually true. These tyrant rulers, Arab and non-Arab rulers, were actually colonial agents. They were the arms and the feet and the eyes and the minds of the Western colonial powers that will indoctrinate, that will help kill the Muslims and strengthen the Zionist occupation. They're the ones who are surrounding Palestine and surrounding Gaza. They're the ones who prevented a bottle of water to enter Gaza. They're the ones who prevented all the injured and all the aid to come to Gaza. Actually, again, just basic human necessities, water, food, medicine, was blockaded, was stopped from entering by the corrupt tyrant rulers. So Gaza triumphed because it has exposed all of these regimes and governments for the Muslims. So now we know better, now we know the reality of such regimes and governments. Also, how Gaza triumphed is that 2 million Muslims have revived 2 billion. So 2 million Muslims in Gaza have revived 2 billion Muslims across the globe. We are more than 2 billion people who, if we roar, if we move, the whole world will come to its knees. How could we be the weakest nations in the world? How could we be the most oppressed, the ones who are being genocides or genocides are being committed against us? The war in Gaza and what happened in Gaza, and Gaza has revived the hearts and the minds of 2 billion people. Where if you go across the Muslim world, this fear and this indoctrination has already been gone. So Gaza has revived the hearts and the minds of the Muslims, where we realize now that we are one Muslim ummah, that we have power, we have capacity, and we do have the material capacity to be able to support our issues and prevent such further occupations and such further genocides from happening. So if you go across the Muslim land right now, there is no respect, there is no regard to the so-called regimes and Arab and so-called Muslim rulers, because Muslims know better. Also, we know that we have the capacity. Imagine if Gaza being attacked for 1,500 months. Do you know that more than 100,000 tons of explosives have been dropped on Gaza? This is equivalent to more than 4 atomic bombs. This is more than all the explosives that have been dropped and used during the Second World War, all combined in 5 years. So the whole Second World War for 5 years have not dropped bombs as much as was dropped on Gaza in 15 months. So imagine that much of killing and oppression and genocide and blockade and all of that. Nevertheless, the will and the desire of the people have not been broken. This is a triumph. This is victory in that sense. So alhamdulillah, Muslims realize and they have come to know that we have the capacity not to challenge the Zionist entity only, but also to challenge the whole world. So if we decide, we have the capacity. And if we move, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give us victory and support. Also, Gaza has taught us a lesson. It is very easy to open a book about Aqidah and know that rizq comes from Allah, tawakkul is on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and life and death is in the hand of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But that could have not been explained better than the Muslims in Gaza and their steadfastness, where these ideas of the Aqidah are lively examples. When we say tawakkul ala Allah, we depend on Allah, there's nothing as much as we see in Gaza that can explain that. When we say rizq, provision comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, nothing as better as what we've seen in Gaza. When we say victory and support comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, nothing better than the example that is drawn by the Muslims in Gaza. So all of these are examples and lessons and victories that have come with the flood that happened and started from Gaza. So again, under the understanding of what happened in Gaza and the subsequent events, even in Syria and the rest of the Muslim world, we can understand our reality that we live here in America and the new administration. So that leaves us with a responsibility. So regardless where we live, regardless whether we're Americans or non-Americans, we're here on a visa or here as indigenous, born and raised, whether there is Trump or Biden before or someone else is going to come after that, we have to recognize this fact that we are part and extension of the Muslim Ummah. The 2 billion Muslim Ummah count that Gaza has revived and brought to life. So we should not forget that. So under this understanding, inshallah, we go into our today's topic and discussion of Trump's policy and how it is going to be different from Biden and the rest before him. So we can look at Trump's policy under two main categories. The first one is the foreign policy of Trump's policy, and there is also domestic policy of Trump's policy. Trump is an American president who is no different than the rest of the presidents. He comes from an elite family, capital, owners. They're billionaires, if not multi-billionaires. They own the capital. They own corporations. So they come to further advance their own agenda. Whether he has a pride like Trump and he is a maniac and he's crazy about his pride and his arrogance, or not like Biden, nevertheless they have an agenda, and this agenda is to further their, again, the policy of those who put him in power. So the main attributes of the foreign policy of Trump's presidency will be, as we read it from before his first 4 years in office, and as what we see is coming out of his mouth and his administration. So I call that subjugation and indoctrination. So Trump loves this arrogance and this attitude of imposing and enforcing, iron fist, and flexing muscles and enforcing something he likes to see or he likes to do. So I call this, again, subjugation and indoctrination. I'll give you an example. He recently spoke about Greenland. He spoke about Canada. He wants to take Greenland. He wants to take Canada to become the 50th or 51st state of the U.S. Country. He wants to rename the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of whatever, California or the U.S. He wants to also take Panama, Panama Canal. He wants to, so all of his policies that he envisions across the globe are exemplified by indoctrination and subjugation. So he thinks he has the capacity, he thinks that he can impose that, and he uses his military power as a threat, and he uses his diplomatic influence and his connections with the tyrants to advance his policy. So if you look at all of that subjugation and indoctrination, he wants to do that at different levels. Number one, the political arena in the world. He wants to impose more tariffs and more customs. He would impose tariffs up to 60% on anything that comes from China, 25% on anything that comes from Canada and Mexico, 20% on anything that comes from Europe. So all of these are just policies that will subjugate, indoctrinate, and show that he can flex his muscles and impose his policies, not necessarily for good economic reasons, but because he thinks he can. And he thinks that this is the way to make America great again. So more sanctions as well. He wants to impose more sanctions on China and Russia, on Iran, and anybody who may have a problem with his policies. Also, his foreign policy is also highlighted by his support and connection with the tyrants, whether it is the Kim of South Korea or the Putin of Russia, or the oppressive tyrant Arab and Muslim rulers, whether it is bin Salman or bin Zayed or Sisi or what have you. And he brags about having very, very strong, good relationships with them, and they actually do have very good relationship with him. Not because they're friends, but because they're masters and agents. So an example of that is what he said to bin Salman, that he said, I need from your majesty $600 billion, and actually you're a cute guy, why not make it $1 trillion? So he wants to just take, and again, he commands, and such puppet rulers would actually answer. So it's not any relationship, it's not a mutual understanding, it's not a mutual benefit between both countries. No, it's a master who's commanding his servant, and his servant got no choice but to answer. So all of this subjugation and foreign policy is to, again, indoctrinate as much as possible, steal as much as possible, milk as much as possible, whether it is the Muslim lands or otherwise. And he does not recognize any allies. In this, it's only a war of game and muscles. So if you have bigger balls, if you have strong muscles, if you have bigger military, if you have a stronger policy, then you can indoctrinate, you can impose, and you can enforce such policies on the world. So this is mainly his foreign policy regarding the rest of the world. But very important for us is to understand his foreign policy regarding, for example, Palestine. So this is very unique and different. Unlike Biden, where we've heard for 15 months his hypocritical comments about his attempts to a ceasefire in Gaza between the Muslims and the Zionist entity, Trump doesn't do that, and that's not what he's saying. Good to see you. Trump doesn't do that. So Trump's policy in the Muslim lands regarding mainly Palestine is one that gives the Zionist entity as much as possible of land. As he said, I see a very tiny spot on the map. The so-called Zionist entity is very small on the map. How can we get more area? How can we get more distances? How can we make it bigger? So, and he means what he says. How he can make it bigger, he just said 2 days ago that he wants to transfer the Muslims in Gaza from Gaza going to Egypt and going to Jordan. What he means going to Jordan is not the Muslims in Gaza, he meant the Muslims in the West Bank. So his policy is to give more masses, more area, more distances, make the so-called Israel bigger by giving them the Muslim lands in Palestine. So how we want to do that? Okay, mass transfer, mass movement of the Palestinian Muslims outside Palestine. So that's number one. Number two, recognize all the illegal settlements as cities, as legal, regular establishments, where the international, we don't recognize the international law, we don't recognize the United Nations resolutions, but nevertheless they do. So he violates all of that. So the international law, the international community have recognized that all of these settlements are illegal. So what was occupied 1948, after 1948, 1967, 1982, all of these are illegal settlements. So Trump comes and says, all of this is legal. I do recognize that, and this is going to be given to the Jewish entity, the Zionist entity. Number two, all the so-called West Bank is not anymore West Bank, as they call it, Yehuda wa Samira, Judea and Samar. So all of that is going to be, according to Trump's policy, is going to be given. I'm not trying to draw a very dark, grim picture, but this is what this guy is saying. So if you're worried about his foreign policy and domestic policy, which shouldn't affect us rather than, or more so than, taking it seriously and working towards our own agenda, our own politics, rather than just being idle and passive. So Trump is going to give as much possible to the Zionist entity of Palestine as he can, and he just tested waters by saying, okay, we're going to give, or we're going to transfer the masses in Gaza to Jordan and Egypt. That's just an example. Regarding his domestic policy, again, I'm trying to, inshallah, cover and move to the more relevant topic for us here. Regarding his domestic policy, Trump faces many challenges, and I don't think he or any other president can face them or solve them. So number one, he has a homeland security issue. An example for that and how they look at it is the increased, is many folds, many times increased surveillance against the Muslims. Again, you can see cameras that I haven't seen last time I was here. And you can see the more increased, again, questioning and stopping at the airports. Almost anybody who travels to certain areas in the Muslim land, or anybody who even has a tweet, or he has spoken, or he has said something in the past 15 months, he's stopped and he's asked whether by Homeland or FBI or CIA or whatever at the airport, customs. So we see that there is an increased security concerns for America. And the reason, if you see, there was such an increased Islamophobia policy against Islam and Muslims in the beginning of the war, in October, November, December 2023, if you have seen, it was tremendous, where it was annoying, like to the point, why is it so much? Because they want to alienate the Muslims. They cannot afford that such 5 or 6 or 10 million Muslims already recognize themselves as Muslims and they work for their own agenda. No, we want to alienate them, we want to have policies against them, we want to scare them off, so you guys take it easy and you don't participate politically and you do not become politically engaged and involved. So again, homeland security issues, and for that they mean that we have millions of Muslims who have recognized their role as Muslims, who are ready to participate. Actually, they have come out on the street, they have spoken in public, they have participated in social media campaigns, they are active in other activities, political activities, they are active with political organizations. This is a real threat to the fabric of the Muslim communities here in the US. They want to keep that under control. So that's a challenge for Trump and any other administration. And in return, they will increase. Unfortunately, that will increase. So the Islamophobia is going to increase. The anti-Muslim organizations' policies will increase. The anti-Muslim policies will increase. Matter of fact, actually, Trump may have signed or may sign in the next day or two an executive order that will give the CIA and the FBI and Homeland Security the right to deport, and he could be U.S. Citizen, to deport anybody who may have used language that would be considered negative against the Zionist entity. I've seen that yesterday. So they said that he's signing this executive order that will give the Homeland, CIA, FBI, whoever, the immigration, the right to deport even U.S. citizens when and if they use any language that is considered negative to the Zionist entity. So that's for the Muslims. For the non-Muslims, they don't want people to wake up. They want them to stay asleep. They want to stay as enjoy your life. Drink, lobby, whatever, drink and party at night, go to school, have a loan of $1 million, and then enjoy your life. That's what they want. So because if they wake up, if people wake up, again, the American society is very vicious, is very aggressive. So they will turn against their own government in a blink of an eye, and they don't want that. So they don't want the people, they don't want the masses to turn against their own government. So they will try their best to keep it at the minimum. They don't want people to realize the truth. They don't want people to realize their own conditions. So homeland security is an issue, and Trump's domestic policy would be heavily, again, focused on that. And for us as Muslims, we shouldn't be intimidated. We shouldn't be scared. That shouldn't affect and influence us. We've lived during the good times and the bad times. We've lived during the times of September 11 or the Muslim revolution in Syria and the rest of the world. We've lived during the past 15 months. We've lived the first Trump presidency. We've lived during worse times at time, of Biden's presidency. So inshallah, the message to you today is, again, do not be scared. Do not take it out of context. Inshallah, we be vigilant and we be mature and we be wise, and inshallah we do what we have to do in the best manner, and the best protection lies in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The second attribute of Trump's domestic policy is his economic policy. Indeed, there is truly an economic crisis that America is going through right now. If you look at the unemployment, it's very, very high. If you look at the inflation, it's very high. If you look at the debt, is extremely, extremely high. The national debt is over 30 trillion. The personal debt is, I don't know how many hundreds of billions. Each one of, actually, if you combine the total debt, it's over $300 trillion on U.S. Individuals, corporations, government, and all of that. So if you divide that over the individual, there is almost $1 million of debt. Every American citizen has over $1 million of debt. So that is a real crisis. So also you have taxation. Taxation has gone on so high on the corporation and the real estate and all of that. So people cannot afford, actually, don't look at the sales tax, don't look at the income tax. That's not the majority of it. If you look at the majority of the taxes go something that you don't understand, where you end up paying 70% of your income paying taxes without you even knowing. 15-20% is income tax, that's true, maybe 10% is sales tax, but bigger portion of your taxes that you pay, which is 70% of your income, is something we don't even understand. So taxation is a real problem for Trump, and he's going to have to deal with it. And his way of dealing with that is cut spending. You cannot cut spending when the actual corporations who run the country are the corporations who are benefiting from that. So you cannot bring down the spending on a government from $3 trillion to $2 trillion because these big corporations are the ones who have these contracts. So he's not going to be able to do anything about that. So the economic crisis will continue to expand, will continue to grow, and that will be something that might like what happened in 2008, 2009, it will be imminent that is going to hit sometime very soon. You also have social issues that Trump is going to deal with, and he has also a problem with. You have the gender crisis. Even though he did sign an executive order recognizing only two genders, males and females, but that doesn't change the fact that there are too many sick people in the society who still do not accept that. He still has to deal with all the organizations and all the policies that will be directly focusing on such issues and such gender misrepresentation, because it's hundreds of billions of dollars. So Trump is not going to be able to deal with that, and this is going further to destroy, inshallah, the fabric of society like Homewood. You also have social and domestic violence. It is increasingly increasing. The more economic crisis we have, the more social problems we have, the more violence you will have in a society. And we're not talking about husband and wife fighting and husband is hitting his wife. We're talking about real violence where people kill each other. If you go down to the south side, if you go to the inner city and you see the amount of violence that there is and how many people are killed, actually thousands of people are killed every month in every major city as a result of this violence. They're keeping it very, very quiet, but it's something that they will have to deal with, especially if an economic crisis surfaces even more. You also have immigration as a domestic policy. So Trump has to deal with immigration, even though he's making the biggest deal out of his, big mouth. I don't think this is the biggest issue that he's going to have to deal with. No Trump, no Biden, no other future president is going to be able to deal with this immigration crisis, because they actually they need that. If you look at the jobs that an average American is not going to be able to actually fulfill and take care of, these are over 20 million jobs. This is numbers, 20 million jobs that nobody other than the immigrants can take, whether they are in the farms, whether they're in the industry, whether they are in the services. So there are 20 million jobs who are being performed by illegal immigrants that no Trump, no Biden, no other future or past president is going to be able to deal with. So yes, they are deporting. Actually, matter of fact, and this is a fact, that Obama deported more than all the 40-some presidents before him combined. And he didn't even say one word about immigration being a crisis, being a problem. So Obama did send out more immigrants than all the American presidents before him combined. And again, that's a fact. So Trump is going to deport maybe 50, maybe 100, maybe a million, but he's not going to be able to deal with more than 20 million immigrants who are paying taxes, paying mortgages. By the way, this is also a very important point. Back in 2008, when Bush came and said that we're going to deport some immigrants, and he did deport almost 200,000, that brought the economy to its knees, because these 200,000 that were deported were paying taxes and they were paying their mortgages. So when they stop paying their mortgages, a lot of these banks are going to be defaulting, because that will create imbalance in the system. So just off the record, so they are not willing to do that. And the economy still needs millions of immigrants who are fulfilling these jobs and services. Also, Trump's domestic policy is going to focus on healthcare. The healthcare system costs in America over $1.5 trillion a year. If you look at this number and you put it in magnitude, it's very hard to comprehend. So healthcare system costs more than $1.5 trillion. How are you going to deal with that? And if you look at it, the cost of certain medications, certain procedures is multiplied 1,000 times. So certain medications are, cost $100,000. The bill costs probably 20 cents, and it is sold at $100,000. Whether anti-cancer, viral medications, they are multiplied millions of times, not thousands of times. So Trump cannot do anything about it because this is the biggest mafia in the world. The drug industry, and I come from the medical background, it is the biggest cartel in the world, and Trump cannot do anything about it. So the cost of healthcare is going to increase, and he is not going to be able to do anything about it. And again, this is a challenge for him. Also, education. Education is definitely a challenge because higher education requires taking a loan. Unfortunately, it's not free. And I'm not telling you to take a loan, inshallah, try your best not to take a loan, and taking a loan is haram in this, but student loans stands at more than $10 billion. I'm sorry, this is a loan of $1.5 trillion. So student loans at the end of 2023, $1.5 trillion in America. So this is the biggest, the biggest individual chunk of loan there is. Bigger than that is the home loans, but that's a family, that's not individual. So student loans are going to continue to climb, and Trump or anybody else cannot do anything about it. So these are the main, if you want, outlines of his domestic and foreign policy. So how does that impact us, again, to the talk of today? How is this new administration, with all these challenges, with all of these promises and all of these visions, whether it is fixing the muscles and subjugation and indoctrination, or what have you, how are they going to impact every one of us in this life? Actually, I don't think it is going to impact us further in a negative way than what we already living under. So living under a kufr system, and living under a system that already indoctrinates the rest of the world and take Muslims and Islam as its enemy, supports the Zionist entity, and have all of these policies built and orchestrated, specifically designed against us, is not going to make our lives worse. It's already bad the way it is. I'm not trying to again make it negative or scare you, but it's already bad the way it is because we have policies that are specifically designed against us as Muslims. What we should do about them is that take a stance. We stand against the oppression of all types. We stand against any law and any regulation that will affect us and impact us negatively. We stand in support of our issues as Muslims here or abroad. We work towards fulfilling our own policies, our own agenda, our own interest according to what Islam says, halal and haram. We abstain from engaging in haram, and we do that which Islam had already ordained. And again, in a nutshell, inshallah, this is what we have to do, and this is what we can do maybe in a